Good morning and welcome. Patriot Radio News Hour. Joe and Jason live on this Tuesday. I hope it finds you well. Our toll-free number 800-951-0592. The website at allamericangold.com. And the Fed is meeting right now. Yes, they've all gathered and all at the expense of the taxpayer as they're going to sit around and, well, talk about how great they are and how much they've done to help the American economy. And it's not their fault that there's inflation. No, it's somebody else's fault. They're just trying to help. But don't worry, they actually don't want to really fight inflation anyway, as everybody says no rate hike. This is the pattern, right? Once the Fed sets a pattern, it's very hard for them to do, because then they would have to admit they were wrong, and they never do that. It's amazing when you think about it. So they came into existence in 1913, and Jason, I don't think one time, not even one time that I can recall in 110 years, have they ever said they were wrong.
Because they never claim it's their fault, and so all of their positions are how to fix the problems that are out there that in most cases they have caused to begin with. I mean, 1913, I guess, well, I take it back. They've caused all the problems. They caused them before they were even the Federal Reserve. So, J.P. Morgan did the 1907 crash, and then he conveniently saved the 1907 crash, and then so you guys, the U.S. government you guys need to come up with something to fix this. What, the problem that you caused, J.P. Morgan? Yeah, that's the trick, isn't
exactly.
it, Joe? They're
that's
never
a great
wrong,
one.
And they never create the problem, right?
They didn't create the problem, and they're never wrong. That's exactly what I would love to be. I think there's only one person that can lay claim to that title, and we all know who I'm talking about, and they definitely aren't that. That is for sure. Speaking of problems, it's official. The U.S. debt now officially over $33 trillion. We're almost at 33.1. 0.1, that's $100 billion. But officially over $33 trillion. And by the way, in the last 90 days, a mind-blowing $1 trillion was added. I mean, if you annualize that, that would be a $4 trillion budget deficit. Don't worry. That's not going to happen this year. It's not going to happen this year. It's going to happen. It's just not going to happen this year. But they jumped another $56 billion in a day. Obviously, the Treasury needing to issue more and more debt, and then, of course, pay for the debt. Now, to give you an idea of why this is bad, because a lot of the payments, as these treasuries expired, they only paid an average. If you average the interest rate, it wasn't even 3%. Of course, now they're buying everything. The 10-year note, the 30-year note are the cheapest vehicles. They're well above 4%. Of course, obviously the short stuff, that's approaching 6%. So, Jason, interest on the debt over the next several years, 2024, 2025, is actually going to get worse. So we're going to have, in 2024, we'll spend $1 trillion in interest payments alone. 2025 is going to be higher than that. And it's a situation now where I guess money isn't free anymore, and all that reckless borrowing is starting to come home to roost. And here's the problem. Tax revenues keep falling. So it's really a double whammy here where the government's getting less revenue. The interest that they have to pay keeps going up. And then, of course, at the same time, the amount of money they got to spend keeps rising. It's really the three-headed monster. It's the pitchfork of exploding debt. And need I remind everybody that, what is it, next week? 2 weeks. Fiscal year 2024 starts for the government. We have no budget. So right now, we could, if they can't agree to something, we could have a government shutdown on top of it. I know the House, they threw up something that's never going to go anywhere because they actually wanted to cut spending. That's a non-starter. But Jason, this is a situation now where I think this is kind of why we're seeing everybody, the rest of the world, start really realizing, okay, we knew they were never really going to pay it back. But now we're at this point where it's exploding so fast. It's going up so much, so quickly, that it's really starting to unnerve a lot of the holders of U.S. debt.
Never going to pay it back is actually better than not going to be able to pay it back, right? That's what I think they're seeing. They're seeing that I don't know if they're going to be able to pay it back. And you're right, 10% less tax revenue and 10% higher bills to pay for the government. Those two things, that's 20% incapabilities of doing your business, and most of that 10% higher in bills is coming from the interest on the debt, Joe. So it's, that's not a good place to be. And I mean, that's like being fired from a job or being demoted at your job, and then your bills just went up. I mean, that's what happened to the federal government, and we're going to see it, aren't we? We're going to see the repercussions here soon.
Yeah, and again, this is part of, when the Federal Reserve, we're talking about them not raising rates. This is one of the big reasons why. Right? This is a huge reason. I mean, obviously, it kills the banks. It kills the deficit projections are all out of the water. By the way, year over year, we've now spent $2.2 trillion more than what we've taken in. And that's going to be a good year compared to what we see in the next couple of years. We'll be back. Eight hundred 951 A quick look here at the markets. The Dow's down 250. The S&P's down 30. The Nasdaq's down 120. Gold's up a couple of dollars here. Pretty strong, unusual on rate meeting weeks. But again, this is all because not only do they think the Fed is not going to raise tomorrow, that there's a good chance they may be done raising. I don't know that I buy that, but we'll see. If nothing else, I think the most pessimistic view is, well, they'll hike one more time and then be done. All of those are bullish for gold. Silver is flat right now. The 10-year note at 4.34. Gosh, crude oil, I don't want to say it, up again, right under $93. So right now, 92.92, up $1.44 on crude oil. Brent approaching $96. And if you're worried about what's coming, you need to have investments not correlated to Wall Street. That's why gold and silver are so good. That's why do we recommend why refi? I mean, right? Because a lot of people ask that. Why would Joe do that? Why would Jason say, hey, check out why refi? Because we know having all of your money in any one thing it's just not smart. It's not smart. Having all of your money in the stock market, not smart. Having it all in housing, not smart. Having it all in gold and silver, that's not smart. But right now, think about what we just talked about. National debt, up $2.2 trillion in 12 months. And we have an unemployment rate that averaged like 3.5%. Right? I mean, you can't have better times than that. I mean, that's the pinnacle of times. And it tells you that this is and everybody kind of sees when the Fed announces they're done raising rates, that's going to be the last stock market rally we see until, I don't know. I mean, obviously, the markets will rally again at some point, but the next 5 to 10 years look awfully difficult for Wall Street. They just do. Right? I mean, we know about inflation. We know about interest rates. But a lot of these businesses aren't even going to be able to refi come next year. Bankruptcies are flying. With only the last thing left is we still got people working for now. We'll talk about holiday hiring. Not good news. This isn't good. What a lot of the retailers say is coming, but you need something else outside. That's why we love Y-Refi. Well, two reasons. One, they got great rates of return, up to 10.25%. I mean, that's awesome. If you want to do it for 1 year, it's 6.25. Still great. You give them their money for 5 years, you get 10.25% a year. It's fixed. It doesn't change. Your money, it's compounded daily. You can turn your income on. You can turn it off. Why I love it is because this is one of the sore spots for a lot of Americans, student loans, and how they're in default, and you can never get rid of them, and they've ruined people's lives. Why refi? They don't do it for everybody. They're smart about it. But they know a lot of these people, if somebody would just get their boot off their neck, they can make these payments. And think about this, the average Y-Refi, this is somebody, they've defaulted. They got whacked with all the fees, the late fees, the interest, right? They owe big bucks, $50,000, $100,000. They have their total student loan debt paid off in 8.5 years. And this is something where the banks have written all of these people off. That's why we love them so much. Check them out. InvestYRefi.com. That's the word invest, the letter Y, REFY.com. Or call them at 888-Y-REFI-24. Remember, you got to have the $50,000. That's kind of the big deal there. But you can use an existing IRA. Some of you can use a 401k. But, Jason, as we watch this and we're getting ready for the Fed yesterday, home builder sentiment, which has been unusually decent. I mean, not great, don't get me wrong, but unusually decent, collapsed this month. Matter of fact, one of the biggest drops, this is reminiscent of the housing crash type numbers. We had home builder confidence fall 11 points in just the last 60 days. It is now at the lowest levels of the year. They say that mortgage rates above 7% has significantly eroded buyers' purchasing power. And one of the other things now, Jason, these new home builders, they'll offer you an incentive, a little cheaper rate, but now that cheaper rate still isn't cheap enough, Jason, and they're running up against, well, we can't lower the price of the house that much because it's still really expensive to build a house.
Correct, and the supply of houses it's basically been low since 2008. You know, they stopped building houses because of the housing crash. They were kind of getting back to normal in the last couple of years, but they never really got the inventory back up, and that kind of keeps the prices settled. And so now you have, it's interesting. Normal interest rates creates no confidence in the housing market. We're at normal interest rates. This is kind of where things should be, and it's so upsetting. And you had mentioned on the Y-Refi you were talking, and you said the markets, it could be 5 to 10 years. It could be 25 years that we don't see the markets at their highs again. And I mentioned as a bankruptcy, the American government was bankrupt twice, once in 1929 and once in 1971. But really, I think the best way to describe it, Joe, is a currency default. It really can, because the country wasn't really bankrupt. They didn't go into bankruptcy. They didn't liquidate assets necessarily like a bankruptcy. But in 1929, when the markets crashed, it was a currency default because they took the gold out because they were printing too much money. And in 1971, well, no more gold standard. It was a currency default. That's where we're at right now. I think that's where we're at. The great new reset. Well, it's a currency. It's the Federal Reserve note. It's a currency default that's happening. And it's in both those other times, Joe, there was a lot of chaos. I mean, look at the 70s, coming out of Vietnam, and then the inflation that blew up the finances of this country. We're headed for a 1970s, and hopefully it won't be like a 1929, which that was the Great Depression, heading into World War II. Either one of those is bad, Joe.
Yeah. and the index is for current sales conditions eroding. The next 6 months is negative, but here is the big number. So 50 is like 0. Prospective buyers down to 30. So that's like negative 20. And then they were telling, according to Bloomberg, home builders were saying, listen, everybody's waiting for rates to go down. That's another one. This could be a long time because I don't see rates going down. The Fed even says, listen, we're not doing that, right? This isn't going to be, oh my gosh, we stopped raising rates and then next meeting we're going to start cutting rates. But again, Jason, it really is about not being able to afford a home. They're saying that sales have faded in September. 32% of builders say that they've been cutting price. 59% of builders say that they're offering some form of incentive to try to get people to buy homes, and it's just not enough. Because, let's face it, home buying's a little different. Most people are shopping for a payment, aren't they? Hey, I can afford, and whatever that number is, I can afford $3,000 a month, $4,000 a month, $5,000 a month, whatever that number is. That's really what they're buying, right? Well, how much equals $5,000 a month after I pay, the mortgage, the interest, right? All that, the insurance, right? I can make how much home can I buy? Right? How much does that equate to? And that used to be, you can buy $1 million home. That's no longer the case. Right? Well, maybe it's, $700,000, $600,000. Well, I can only afford a $3,000 payment. You know what the home builders are probably saying to these people? Well, then you can't afford a home. Right? That's kind of where we're at right now, Jason. Right? Well, if that number, right, 3,000, that's a tough one to find.
I was just looking this out because it sounds like what we're headed for is the 40-year mortgage is like a standard situation. So I just looked it up on a Google search, and there's a lot more 40-year mortgage talk on the internet than there used to be. So it's out there. There's actually 40-year mortgages out there now. So I guess that might be the solution, Joe, for your payment situation you just talked about. Well, we can get you lower payment. Jump into our 45-year or 50-year mortgage. I mean, that's do you really own it if you're going to take 2/3 of a lifetime to have to pay it off? How are you gonna bequeath that to your kids? Hey, you get to have a $600,000 mortgage when I die. That's what it looks like we're headed for, Joe.
Well, when you think about it, that it makes sense. And what do I mean why that makes sense? So think about autos. I mean, go back 30, 40 years. An auto loan used to be, a used car auto loan used to be 2 years. That was it. New car 3. Then it went to 4. Right? Then it became 5. Now it's like 8 years, right? So, think about where that's gone. And again, I guess that's, when you think about where we are, that's probably, it's one of two things, right? Either number one, we extend the terms so they can afford the payment, or number two, it's got to crash. But as I said, here's the problem for home builders. It's not like, hey, we're building this, let's just say a $500,000 home. Hey, we're building this $500,000 home, but it only cost us $200,000.
Yeah, there's no margin.
That's not what's happening. Right? The house cost them $450,000, right? I mean, they're like, hey, we don't have a lot of wiggle room here to be able to do anything. And Jason, I think that's something, I'm kind of surprised that hasn't happened yet, or why they don't do more of that. Maybe it's because, and again, I don't know, maybe the U.S., do we need to start issuing a 40-year Treasury note to make that happen? I don't know. I
wonder if the banks don't like it because, it's a lot. You add 10 years to a 30-year. That's a lot more risk on the loan. But as the banks are going to come crashing and burning down in the next couple of years, they might just be told, look, the 40-year mortgage is how you're going to save your industry. You just have to do it. You take the risk, bank. Bank, you have to do it. And what are they going to say? No. We're either going to crash and burn, or we'll offer something that gets these people into a payment they can afford. But, obviously the banks would probably be given some sort of assurance that, okay, all the rocky times are over. We're going to have higher interest rates, but this will be the new norm. The new normal, we've heard that in the last few years, the new normal. So, I would not be surprised at the 40-year mortgage. And if that works and the banks are happy with it, the 50-year mortgage will come right behind it, Joe.
Well, maybe, you know what? Maybe that's the answer. Just go right to 50, right? Just go.
I know Japan
Japan
experimented with the 100-year mortgage for a while. Do you know that? I forget how many years ago I heard that, but some Japan banks were offering the 100-year mortgage, and you had to sign 1 or 2 or 3 generations into the loan. So I guess it's however far you want to stretch it, Joe.
Yeah, all of that are going to be interesting. And then how about this one? Retailer saying, yeah, we're really not going to be hiring for the holidays. I'll tell you about that next. Picture Radio News Hour. Don't touch that dial. $800-951-0592. Yesterday we were selling those 40% Kennedy bags. They're $6,800, which we told you yesterday. That's below melt. You get almost 300 ounces, 296 ounces of silver in a full bag of Kennedy 40%. This is mostly 65s through 68s. There could be some 69s in there, but 65 through 68 primarily in these Kennedy 40% bags. It's just under 300 ounces of silver. We have them at $6,800. We'll break them down for you a little bit because I know that for a lot of people, $6,800 is a lot. We'll go all the way down. The minimum we'll take a quarter bag. So a full bag's $2,500. A quarter bag's $500. If you want a quarter bag, $1,700. So below spot. Again, below spot, below melt on these bags of 40% Kennedy half dollars. Quarter bags are $1,700. Full bag, $6,800 at 800-951-0592. And, you think about anytime you can buy silver for under melt, that's a great opportunity. We know silver's $23.15, $23.20, something like that. And we know how undervalued it is. We know. I mean, look at the gold to silver ratio. It's in the 80s. Right? That number should be like 65. Right? Which means silver should already be, $30+ dollars. And even at that, everybody, we're talking about really when you think about probably, I don't know if there's another commodity that you can say is the only thing that hasn't gone higher than where it was during the 70s up to 1980. Silver hit a high of $50. We hit it briefly for one day on Wall Street. We got right up to $50, and then Wall Street changed all the margin requirements. What did that? You couldn't even buy a silver contract. All you could do was sell, force that price down. But this is a huge, huge opportunity. And it would be great if it was around. If it was a silver bar, that'd be a great price. But this is actually government hallmarked, and it's U.S. government hallmarked. You don't buy U.S. government hallmarked anything for under melt. It just doesn't happen, but we have it here today, 800-951-0592. We are talking about retailers. This one really stood out to me. Holiday hiring. This is coming from Reuters. They said that U.S. retailers are only going to add 400,000 retail, I guess, seasonal jobs. I mean, it feels like that UPS and FedEx would hire that many, by themselves. Walmart. To give you an idea of how low this number is, it is the lowest number since the Christmas of '08. So that was the height of the crash, right? The financial crisis was in full effect. It's the lowest number since then. And think about, okay, I get that. What about last year? How many did they hire last year? 520,000. So you're talking about a decline of more than, they're going to hire 25% less help this year than last year. Jason, that just kind of really stuck out. I mean, I know things are a little slower, but 25% less, that is significant. There's something that doesn't add up with when we look at the employment numbers, when we look at the economy, we keep saying, well, everything's kind of, it's okay, right? Everything's all right. This doesn't say things are okay.
That's a really bad number because I'm going off memory, but if I remember right, last year was a tremendous down year for holiday hiring. So if it's that much worse than you're just talking about from last year, and last year was a bad year. So if this is the drop from a bad year, that number is far worse than how you presented it, Joe. Because I believe, I could be wrong, but there was a lot less hiring last year. There was a lot less holiday activity last year. So this collapsing from an already low number is abysmal.
How about this? Challenger, Gray, and Christmas. At this time last year, companies had already announced 258,000 seasonal holiday jobs. This year, right now, Challenger and Gray and Christmas says 8,000. So same time last year, retailers were like, hey, we're going to add 258, which essentially by the time it got closer, it doubled. Right, because they finished at 520. And now Challenger, Gray, and Christmas is saying, well, so far there's only been 8,000 jobs announced by companies. Jason, that really does tell you they are being super cautious right now. They don't really want to hire anybody, it doesn't feel like.
Didn't you say there was a bunch of ships just floating around outside of China and doing a whole lot of nothing, right? That's stuff that doesn't fit in the warehouses. I remember a couple of years ago, I think it was 2021, we talked about all the warehouses they were building in California. Probably to put all this stuff that's not being bought last year. And with the ships starting to build up out there again, Joe, that means if people aren't buying stuff, you can't hire someone to sell it. It's just basic economics, right, Joe? That I'll tell you right now, I don't spend a lot for the holidays anyways. I think it's a put on anyways. It's not what I celebrate during the holidays. And you know what? The kids, they may not like me, but they do when they get older. When I hand them the silver, I just hand them silver. Here's some silver.
Right.
The ones that get it are super happy. The ones that don't get it are scratching their head. But it doesn't take too many years before they understand how good of a gift that was.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really interesting. Like I said, Challenger's talking about they've never seen this. And Challenger, Gray, and Christmas, they've been tracking this stuff forever. That's what they do. That's how they make their money. They sell this information out there. It's saying that the retailers, they've never been this late in September, and these retailers haven't announced plans like Kroger, Walmart, right? They said they've announced these plans by now every year. They haven't done it. And again, I think it just tells you this is the problem. And I say it all the time. No, people get tired of hearing it. How did you go bankrupt? It was gradual at first, and then it was sudden. Right? And I got a feeling these retailers are saying suddenly appears to be right around the corner. Patriot Radio News Hour. Get those 40% silver below melt at 800-951-0592. Jason and I will be right back. 592 Patriot Radio News Hour, quarter bags of 40%. Silver Kennedy half dollars at 1,700, full bags at 6,800. Once again, below melt at 800, 9510592. And Jason, what great opportunity.
I got a suggestion from one of the listeners. They said because these are $3.50 each. That's it's a little less than that. $3.50 each for each silver half dollar. This guy suggested, look, if you have a local friendly card game with your friends, right? You buy the bag at $half and you ante up $5 per coin, right? And you can have $5 bets all night long with your local poker game. And then when they go home, they're actually taking something that actually has physical value instead of a plastic chip. They can bring it down. They can bring it back to the next poker game, right? You're the guy that has all the silver. And then the other thing I was thinking is, we're talking about the holidays, right? And how I give silver out to the kids. You literally will be Santa Claus with your bag of goodies. You can hand out handfuls of these things to people, right? And give them out for Christmas. So because we're not going to have cheap $3.50 silver half dollars by Christmas time. This is something that just popped up. So kind of a fun way to just give out silver, and it doesn't cost you a whole lot to hand out a $3.50 piece of silver.
There you go, 800-951-0592. Clorox said they were hit with a major cyber attack in August. Get ready for empty shelves. Apparently, Clorox said, hey, you can't make this stuff up, right? How about Vegas? We didn't even talk about Vegas. People couldn't even get into their hotel rooms. The slot machines wouldn't work. Apparently, it took down the Clorox infrastructure, and they had to stop production because the automated ordering stopped working, so they ran out of products. Clorox says, hey, they're getting it back up, but the shelves may be empty for a little while. And then crude oil. Man, I will tell you, not a good situation here. China is buying the most amount of crude oil, I want to say, ever. And China's economy is not great. It's not great. And yet the demand is overwhelming. China is the biggest bullish factor in crude right now, and saying that at a time when U.S. stockpiles are depleted, China's stockpiles are at all-time record highs. It's kind of interesting. China's kind of preparing for something a little different than we are, aren't they? Listen to this. China holds 96% of all the global copper inventory, 75% of the aluminum, 70% of the corn, 54% of wheat, 30% of soybean, and 22% of all the oil in the world right now. It's kind of interesting. Of course, China also, what are they stocking up? Gold, right? They've been adding to their gold. China's ramping up their holdings of stuff. Well, we're ramping up our holdings of debt, Jason.
Yeah, and they're not even close to 25% of the population. They have a big population, but they're nowhere near 25%. I think they're around 12% of the world population. So to be holding that much, and of course they're an industrial nation, so they're going to have more than their share of industrial metals. But most of those numbers, Joe, are so far higher than what their population needs. It definitely sounds like they're not too excited about all those treasuries they're holding. It sounds like they're diversifying, right? Joe.
They're diversifying. That's exactly what it sounds like. How about the UAW? So the strike started last week. Some very key plants that they struck. They're saying that talks have gone so poorly that they said that if significant progress is not made before Friday, more locations will be called on. And that sounds like, Jason, this strike is going to get worse before it gets better. And I only bring that up because that's not a good thing either for the Fed, right? That just means, okay, cars aren't being made, trucks aren't being made. Whatever's out there is going to cost a lot more.
it's going to cost a lot more on either situation because if you pay the higher wages, you'll get the inflation.
Yeah,
It's
that's the problem.
it's interesting that the old strikes used to be because the companies were a little too greedy and and the employees would unionize to try to push to get their share, right, their fair share. But that's not what strikes are now. Nowadays, it's all about inflation. Say, hey, you got to pay us more because you're not giving us enough money to pay our bills. So it's completely inflationary. And you're right, Joe. They could pay the more money, prices go up, or they don't make anything, the prices go up. Supply and demand is both getting bad pressure on both of those for inflation, Joe.
Yeah, and the key I think for all of that is unfortunately prices go up, and this is think about this. We had threats of strikes at UPS, FedEx, the airlines. Now they all averted, right? They averted those strikes, but think about the raises that they had to throw out there to avert those strikes. And now the UAW here, and this is the first time ever, by the way, that they've struck all three companies at the same time because they have different contracts. Each company has a different contract. But I highlight because something's going to get done here. I don't know when, right? Is it going to get, my guess is it's going to get a little worse before it gets better, right? So I'm going to assume more people go on strike on Friday. That's just my guess. Now, I don't know. But here's what I do know. Eventually, a deal's going to get done. And the cost is going to be significantly greater. And again, the biggest piece the union wants is the raise immediately. Right? Yeah, the 4 and 5% in the years after, that's one thing. No, we want a big chunk right now. Patriot Radio News Hour. This is what happens when you don't take inflation seriously, which is exactly what the Federal Reserve did. They didn't take it seriously, and now here we are. Final segment coming up. $800-951-0592. The quarter bags of 40% silver at $1,700. Full bags at $6,800. That puts your cost at about $22.90. I want to say $22.96. $22.96. Spot silver right now, $23.17. TV silver. You want to feel even better about it. It's like $23.50. Of course, that's just the December contract. So below melt at 800-951-0592. And how about this? The IRS. Yeah. Well, we know they're on a huge hiring spree. Well, they're getting ready to hire another 3,700 more tax enforcers. And now watch groups are becoming concerned about people making less than $400,000 because remember, that's what if you make less than $400,000, it's not going to change. And now, apparently, there's a little confusion, and I don't think there's any confusion, by the way, as to what technically makes you what they call a high-income person. The IRS kind of playing with words a little bit. Listen, I've already told you, the math doesn't work here. There's just not enough people that make that kind of money to justify the amount of hiring the IRS is doing. It just doesn't work. Of course, this is I don't even think this is the objective, right? This is the smoke screen that they're using. Oh yeah, we're just going after these high income. We got to get our tax dollars, right? And of course, unless you coming up with $2 trillion, well, no. But hey, we may be able to get, I don't know, 10 billion. That sounds like a lot. It isn't, right? That's almost not worth the time because the debt is so big. But Jason, I think this is all getting ready. They need to get these people hired quickly because of what is coming. The digital currencies, remember it's bail-ins, not bailouts. People that have way too much money in banks are going to regret it, and the IRS is going to be sitting there. And you know what? Why do I have a feeling, too, they're going to be waiting for all that cash to come in out of the mattresses? Well, how did you end up with all that cash? Right? Because Walmart won't take cash anymore. Target doesn't take cash, right? Hey, nobody take. Matter of fact, the banks, they're going to probably want to slap a 10. The banks are probably going to be the new Coinstar. Oh, you're coming in with cash. Well, that's a 10% fee, right? And oh, by the way, what, you brought in how much? Now, can you step over here, please? We'll be right with you. We got to get the manager to come over and ask you some questions. And then I'm sure the IRS, they'll be following up a little later, Jason.
Agreed. And on the last segment, you're finishing up with the possible strike, and you said something's got to be done, but I'm sure something will be. But I always have that thing in the back of my mind, well, maybe something doesn't get done, Joe. Didn't Yellow Freight, didn't they probably think something was going to get done? Didn't Lehman Brothers probably think something was going to get done? So, yeah, we can assume something will get done, but I don't completely assume anything when it comes to what's getting ready to happen, Joe.
By the way, just in case you wanted to know, the IRS has never updated its tax code. The last update on what they said was a high income return was 1976. And by the way, that number was only 200,000. It's never been updated since. Yeah, so what does that tell you? 800-951-0592. Jason and I, we're coming right back with the half-empty cup. We got Steve Stars joining us. It should be a good one.